So small business owners, government contractors struggle with prioritizing thousands of things on their plate. Our customers, we get asked this a lot. They've got a lot of things going on. They're spinning a lot of plates in the air, but they don't know what to focus on first, or how do we prioritize our day? And so we wanted to drive into that topic, right? How can you be sure that you're working on the most important thing? Stephen Covey, who has this book, if you can see this, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. He wrote this book. The first time I read it was back in 97. So when I was in the Army is the first time I read it. A lot of us in the Pentagon were reading it. In habit 3, he talks about put first things first, right? And the idea of putting first things first aligns totally with today's training. And this idea of how can you prioritize your day, or how can you make sure that you're working on the most important thing today? So that's what we're going to be diving into today on daily tasks for small business owners, how to look at what you're working on and really making sure you're working on the most important thing. In today's training about what small business owners and really anybody in a company should focus on daily, I want to talk to you about how first you need to understand your capacity, being realistic about the amount of time you have to work on your daily activities. The second thing is I want to introduce you to this concept that goes with Stephen Covey's third habit, put first things first. In there, he talks about this time management matrix. And most importantly, the reason I'm bringing it up is it enables you to see the work and decide how and really proactively avoid the unimportant activities that you might be engaged in, or unimportant tasks. And then the third thing I'll follow up with is wrap up with is kind of an overview of the 5 different types of work that you have. I call them work types. I'm an old software developer in the IT world, and so you'll see me blend a lot of terms from agile software development into the sales training I teach, and capacity comes from that. Work types is a similar type thing. It comes from books on like DevSecOps, but this idea of what are the different types of work. And for us, I've identified 5 that typically in a small business we have. So that's what we're going to cover down on today. If you haven't figured this out already, I talk at a fire hose pace. You can always go back and watch the replay, slow it down. We do these trainings every single weekday, whether it's a holiday or not, we're here. And we do this training live every single weekday to make sure you have the how. So let's get started. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner when I came out of the Army. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you from for your business and for your day. It's really interesting, sidebar. Yesterday, I've been doing these like 400 trainings in a row, and I always say A to Z in this way. For some reason, yesterday I was sick, and my mind made me go A to Z this way. And it's really interesting what happens to you when you're sick. Anyways, hey, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, Government Contracting Success Newsletter. It's where we put a ton of additional information. If you miss training or miss content, it's a great place to catch up, because we'll also do, once a week, we try to dump a digest issue that says, hey, here's the stuff you missed. But make sure you subscribe to the newsletter so that you constantly are kept informed of what we're sharing out there related to government contracting. The last thing, before we get diving into your capacity, I just wanted to say thank you to those who registered for today's training. We had over 140 people registered for training, which I really appreciated. When you do that, it's an easy way for you to say thank you to me and to my team who put these trainings on for you at no cost, right? So it's a very easy thank you, very much appreciated. The second thing is, when you do that, LinkedIn then pushes it out further to other people saying, hey, John and Jane are interested in going this training. You might also be interested in going to this training as well. This is your community. And so the stronger you help us make it, the more people come into it, the more people you can meet and go, oh, I'd like to connect with them. It's not just all about Neil, right, and his training. It's about that chat that you see. And it's about this ability to go into LinkedIn and continue following through on somebody and go, let me look at that person. Oh, we're in the same space. Maybe I'll go connect with them offline. We're like a daily live or living conference, if you will, where you get a chance to network every single day. So make sure you register. We got 2 more trainings this week, Thursday and Friday. And I'd love to have you in there, but make sure you register. It's a quick, easy way to help us. All right, let's dive into understanding your capacity. Again, I said this comes from software development when I first really began to talk about it. And the idea is when you think about your week, and somebody says, well, how much capacity do you have? And somebody goes 40 hours. Well, not really. You really don't have 40 hours because you got all these things going on. And that's what I want to talk about when I say understand your capacity, understand how much time you have available to work. There's this great quote that I like, and you can go learn more about the person who did this quote. I think it's pronounced Goth. Don't quote me on that. All right. But the quote that I like is things that matter or things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. And the idea ties directly into, in fact, this quote comes to me first through Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. In Habit 3, he talks about this. These are some of the things that influenced him that he was studying as he wrote the book, right? Things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. And that's the idea, put first things first. And so when you think about capacity, you have activity that you're going to be doing, right? You only have so much time to work on the things that are important, because you are going to be pulled into things that are sometimes a little less important. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. But you only have so much time. And in the next slide, I'll walk you through how to really think about how much time do I have. But when you are trying to manage your time, you absolutely have things that can't be avoided, right? You have, say, for example, you come in and you have this one customer meeting. Well, it's always going to be there, so you can't avoid it. The customer demands it. It has to happen. That's fine, right? But there are things you can get rid of. And what I want you to be able to do coming out of today, right, is to understand capacity. And the reason I'm saying this, I want you to be realistic about what you can accomplish in any given day or any given week. Sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to accomplish a lot, but we don't have the capacity to get it done. We don't have the time to get done everything we need to do. I'm like one of the worst violators of this, right? I'm constantly trying to go, okay, stop trying to say I'm going to do all of this. Let me just go, what's the one thing I can do? In fact, you can go back and watch a training I've done previously where I talk about understanding your one thing. You don't need to do a lot of things. If you get one thing and it's the most important thing done, then you're going to feel really good about your day. And that one thing doesn't have to take up 40 hours in a week or 8 hours in a day. It could take up 30 minutes. But when you look at what you need to get done, you go, that one thing would really help me and my organization move forward. So we're going to talk about this, but just remember this idea of capacity, right? How much time do I have? I did say that, you might have a customer recurring meeting that's there. That's normal if like there's 3, 4, 10 other people there in a program. But I would recommend you look at your calendar immediately and look at that and go, what meetings can I get rid of? I have a customer, for example, they have a Friday meetings, and they have 2 different meetings with 2 different groups of people in their office. And what I suggested to them is, first off, combine them. Second, drop it down to 30 minutes. And so now they're freeing up, let's say, an hour and a half a day or a week. That's a lot when you think about you only have 40 hours in a general week. And so look at your recurring meetings. Go, do I really need them, or could they be replaced in some way? So the idea here, and I just mentioned eliminate recurring meetings, right? But the idea here of understanding your capacity is to understand what that even means. Your typical week begins with 40 hours. You have 40 work hour a week for the most part, right? And every month we have 168 hours generally of work hours. And so that's what you start with. And then the idea is customer commitments are in there. You have some meetings that you have with your customer that you might have with your customer that you have to, you have to have. You can't get rid of them, and they're a commitment. And so what I want you to do is take those hours away from the 40 hours in your work week. Make sure you're taking away any pre and post time as well. If you have a meeting and it's in person, then you have travel time. If you have a meeting and it's at 2:00, then you probably have a 15-minute window before, at least, to make sure you're on time. That really you can't schedule anything. You might be able to do a little busy work, but that time's kind of away from thinking really hard on your biggest challenges, right, or something. And then afterwards, if you have a meeting with a customer or anybody, then you have activity afterwards that says, I need to do these action items. I need to write meeting minutes. Don't write meeting minutes later. One of my favorite things that, as my wife and I were dating, she was a project manager at CIA and I was a project manager somewhere else. And And she used to come out and meeting minutes were sent like within 30 minutes. And she just reminded me of when I was in the Army, that when we came back from the field, the first thing we did was cleaned our weapons. And so when you have customer commitments, that time immediately following that commitment should be blocked out for action items or just meeting notes, making sure you're squared away so you don't forget it. And when you think that way, then that customer commitment of a 30-minute meeting might expand to, let's say, 45 minutes or an hour of time blocked from the 40-hour week. The next one is get rid of recurring internal meetings. And I don't mean eliminate these, but I mean get rid of it from the 40 hours, right? So if you have a daily stand-up, sometimes customers have 30-minute daily stand-up in the morning. So get rid of that 30 minutes. That's 2.5 hours in a week from that 40 hours that you can't be working on these other things. And then as you move forward, then you'll have what your capacity is to work. For the average person, what I say is you generally lose 40% of your time. Just get rid of 40% of your time. And, so what is that? 16 hours out of a 40-hour work week. When you get rid of that time, then you've got 36 hours left. Or 26 hours left, excuse me. And so that way you're realistically looking at your capacity, the time you have available to take work. The reason I put your mask on first is this is going to transition to the next things I'm talking about, is when you're on an airplane, they teach you that if you're traveling with children and something happens and the oxygen mask drops down, put your mask on first and then your children. Our instinct is to put our children's mask on first. Let me save them, right? But that's not a good idea because you could be fumbling around and things go bad. But if you put your mask on first, which literally will take 10 or 15 seconds, now you are taken care of, which enables you to have all the time in the world to take care of your kid. And it's the same thing here. I want you to think of the most important things you need to be working on as you, and all the other stuff is your kid. You need to somehow make sure you're taking care of yourself in order to take care of all the other activity that's out there. Okay, again, this time management matrix, it's coming from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I absolutely recommend you read it. It's my #1 business book. I read it every single year. And now I've got it on audio, and it's 14 hours, but it's not that much time. It's like 28 days of walking, and I've listened to the whole thing, 30-minute walks or something. And so in here, Stephen Covey talks about 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 and 2 are important tasks that you might be working on, but quadrant 1 is urgent and important. It's got to happen, right? It's crises that pop up, pressing problems or deadline-driven projects. You might think of like proposals that are kind of at the last minute. That's quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, important tasks. And so these are, I like to say it's strategic, but activities he talks about is prevention, relationship building, identifying new opportunities, planning, even recreation or downtime is important. That's like, even just as I read this, I'm reminding myself, you're not doing enough of that. I do enough of the other stuff, but I need to do some downtime, right? It's time to go to Hawaii. Quadrant 3 and 4, though, are the unimportant or the not important things that you might find yourself working on. And not important things can also be urgent and not urgent. So quadrant 3 is urgent, not important tasks that you might work on. Interruptions to your day, phone calls, emails, reports. He writes some calls, some mail. But pretty much, I think nowadays, anything that comes in is a disruption to your day, and that instantly becomes urgent and not important. And this idea of that stuff should sit. You can answer your phone and check your voicemail every 30 minutes, right? Unless it's your family, it does not really need to jump up. But some meetings, right? This is why I'm saying get rid of those recurring meetings that maybe don't matter. And then over on quadrant 4, this is not urgent and not important. If you're in here, you're dealing with busy work, right? You think about email activity that you're processing and looking at your emails, social media, getting stuck in the feed, or phone calls that are in there, people who walk by and talk a lot, right? This is a big thing that happens. There's this idea of the water cooler, right? But there's also this idea of wasted time at the water cooler or going back to the water cooler multiple times in a day. If you find yourself working quadrants 3 and 4, you're kind of basically living an unimportant life, right? You're working in unimportant, or you're doing unimportant things within your business. And we want to pull you up to the quadrant 1 and 2. And then it's not about spending all your time in quadrant 2, but what happens is quadrant 1 tends to take all of our time when we're working on important things, and we need to get over. An example for me is I have this course I really want to get out. It's I think it would be a very helpful course. That's not urgent though, but it is important to me and my team. And I need to block 30 minutes a day to work on it. Right. And so even teaching you this today is reminding me of that. Okay, before I show you how the quadrants line up for government contracting, let me just tell you, I got a BD Masterclass out there that we've released again for 2024. If you want to be the best business developer you can be, to get in the door, to build relationships, to identify opportunities for your company, go check it out, govconchamber.com. You can learn more about it there. I worked really hard to create a lot of content in a short amount of time so that what you're doing is learning how to build those relationships, get in the door, and identify opportunities. Okay, commercial over. Let's go back to time management matrix. And I just put it in here as a way to look at the time management from government contracting. And I just took a stab at it, right? So quadrant 2 in particular, which is where I want you to focus, that's business development activities. When you're out there doing business development, capture, proposal development, relationship building, process improvement on your sales or your business, that's all quadrant 2. That's important, but not urgent. When you can start planning around that, that's how you start moving forward. The reason this is important, especially as it relates to today's training, is if you struggle with what to work on a daily basis, how do I know what first to work on? Of course, you got the crises and you think about what's urgent going to pop up, but that stuff will kind of happen whether you plan it or not. But the urgent part, what I'm encouraging you to do, and I'll show you again in a second, is look into the not urgent but important quadrant 2 section and decide what's one thing I can do on this today so that I get something going, right? You don't always have the same thing every day. And I'll leave quadrant 3 and 4 alone because just in the interest of time, we don't need to go over that. But over on the right-hand side, I did this thing where I said a day in a federal sales life. And I might update this later, but the idea is if you were thinking about what you could do today, I said in quadrant 2, get one new piece of agency data. For example, this morning, I found an implementation plan, not a strategic plan, but an implementation plan for additive manufacturing and 3D printing for one of my customers. I was able to find that. And from that really good piece of information, I'm able to find 5 more, and all of it stuck within a 30-minute window, right? So whatever you're trying to do within your target agency, try to find one more piece of information that helps you really understand that customer and shows that you care. Perform one step forward on an op. This is one of my favorite things, is look at your pipeline and look at the top 5 opportunities you have, for example, and make sure you have a next step. So an example is I have a customer in one of their opportunities. The next step is to find out if this is a live opportunity. They found it on a forecast. They've got some basic information. They like it. It looks good, but they don't really know like where is it in the journey, the acquisition process. And so their next step is to go find that information out. But currently they don't have any points of contact because the one point of contact listed is it's a dead end, right? And so the next thing, the one step they could do to move this opportunity forward is to find the top POCs for this opportunity. And those are generally the small business specialists related to this agency and this op and the contracting officer specialist. If you can't find that, find the head of contracting for there and work it down. But that's their one thing. Just find the POCs. It's not even to have a meeting. Just find out who it is. And so on your most important opportunities, one thing you could do in quadrant 2 is just move that opportunity incrementally forward on a daily basis. And then one of the things I put here is think in 1 to 2 hour tasks. Don't try to think these big things you're going to do in quadrant 2. Just go, what's one thing I can do that will take 1 to 2 hours at most? That way you can get it done in a single day, right? Another example I put here is you could email 3 potential teammates. I have customers trying to get in the Army. So we built a list of 100 winners, prime contractors over there, small. And so one of the things I could do tomorrow is email and call these 3 potential teammates and see if they're open to an intro call. It's not even to have the call yet. That would be another good win, right? But quadrant 2 is about moving things forward incrementally. And that's what I put the last bullet there. Think about improving things generally. Industry days, follow-up emails and calls. I put those in quadrant 1 as an example of your federal sales activity because yes, you got to do that, but they're really not strategic activity. And then quadrant 3 and 4, I'm going to bypass so I can keep going on. You can see this. This will be available later. If you want this as a handout, put handout in the chat. Actually, while I take a drink of water, just put time handout in the chat if you'd like a copy of this. This one's ready, and we can drop that pretty fast. This training is thirsty business. Okay, let's talk about the last thing I really wanted to cover down on is when you're planning your day and you're thinking about your day, I break up what small businesses work on into 5 work types. And the idea of these 5 work types is theoretically everything you're working on could fall into one of these 5 buckets. And so the first one is running your company, what I call back office, right? It's just back office activity. I know people have different names. I'm not here to debate the names. Basically, if it's running your company, I call it back office. That's one type of work. Another type of work is service delivery. This is what I call taking care of your customers. You're out there delivering the services and products you do. So if you're taking care of your customers, that's the second bucket. The third bucket, 4th and 5th, are all about sales. So business development, number 3, is about building relationships and finding opportunities. Number 4, capture management. This is about shaping an opportunity. Capture, the way I describe it, is about shaping one opportunity. You can do capture on multiple opportunities, but capture management is about shaping an opportunity. So that's a separate type of bucket. It's a separate activity. And then proposal management, right? The end of the sales cycle basically is writing a response to the government for opportunities you see. So those 5 buckets, when you plan your day and you're thinking about what can I be working on, I highly recommend you would take the approach of looking at each of these and go, what's the one thing I can work on that if I got it done, it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And this is a question that you ask yourself. It comes from a book called The One Thing, ironically, or coincidentally. So the book is called The One Thing, but the question you ask yourself for each of these 5 buckets, what's the one thing I can do in the back office that if I get it done, it will make everything else easier or unnecessary? And so an example for me on something I did was I switched over basically who I was using to process the money from my customers, from this organization to this organization. It took me a little time, but when it happened, oh my God, a couple of things happened, right? It instantly took away, it made it easier for me to process the money because these guys were giving me a headache. But the other thing is, because I went over here, I didn't even realize this second company had all these additional things that basically eliminated some of my extra tasks. And so that was one thing I could do. And now when I look forward again, I'll do the same thing. If I'm planning tomorrow, which is Thursday, and I say, what's one thing I can do? I'll look in there and just try to find the one thing, not a ton. The next thing, number 2, right? Service delivery, taking care of customers. One thing that I could do as I move forward is really improve the process we have for teaching our customers how to get more and more emails and phone calls answered. I got an email from a customer this morning. It's like, I got another one. It's like we're out fishing and we're reeling it in. And what they meant was they got another customer, potential customer, getting back to them, government buyers saying, yes, let's meet, let's schedule a meeting, right? That's what we mean, fish on, right? And then you go into building a relationship, et cetera. So, but when you look at these activities, you want to sit there and, so for me, service delivery is taking care of my customers. How do I help her and others be able to have even more success? And so they get 30 and 40 and 50% answer rates on their emails and not that typical 10% or less. And it's the same thing I want you to do with business development, capture management, proposal management. If you think about proposal management, maybe one thing you could do today or this week, right, when you're planning it is, what should I be working on? I could work on a reusable write-up. I have a customer who may or may not go after an opportunity, but I suggested to them, well, just write the response anyways. These technical questions that the government is asking, they're perfect for almost everything you want to respond to later on, because she is very narrowly focused in her offering, EEO investigations, HR investigations, et cetera. Let me know if you're interested in that, and I'll introduce you. But anyways, she's writing answers to this, and those answers will be reusable. So that's how she was able to determine, what am I working on today? Literally today, that's what she's working on. And if you do the same thing, you won't overwhelm yourself. You just pick one thing from each of these buckets. Each one should take no more than an hour or 2. And if they're pretty quick tasks, you'll be able to knock them out. And you don't have to do one from all 5 every day. Maybe what you do is say, today I'm doing one thing from number one, and then every week you do one thing on Monday and the Tuesday. Each one of them only touches one bucket on the big quadrant 2 thinking. So here's what I want you to remember coming out of today's training and as you move forward, right? First thing is determine your capacity. Really understand how much time you have available to work on those quadrant 2 tasks, the most important tasks. That way you don't set unrealistic expectations on yourself, which sets you up to feeling like you're not getting things done, or you're failing to achieve what you want. When you set the goals smaller, you'll achieve more. And as you achieve more, you'll find you have the ability, the capacity to do more. Number 2, make sure you spend time in each work type. Like I suggested a minute ago, you could do one work type per week or per day in the week. That way each work type is moving forward weekly. And number 3, maximize those quadrant 2 tasks. Quadrant 2 is about strategic activity. It's important, but it's not urgent. So it'll always fall behind important and urgent unless you give it its place, unless you put its mask on first, then take care of the urgent and important. Hey, if you want some help growing in the federal market and you're doing 1-2 million plus, love to talk to you about our BD Accelerator. Go check it out on GovCon Chamber of Commerce. For all of us, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.